2022 Ways and Means meeting. Please join me for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You got the sideways seat.
All right, first on our agenda, is there anyone here for public participation of anything not on the agenda? I'm not seeing anyone, so we'll move on to the agenda. We've had a slight reordering. We're going to take the housing needs assessment presentation first. I believe we have Selectman Runyon for that. Excellent. Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening,
Take a microphone.
ladies and gentlemen. You may recall last year, this body approved a transfer of funds at the request of the Housing Partnership to conduct a housing needs assessment for the town of Burlington. We've never had one before, and so you were gracious enough to approve that, and I'm here tonight for just a very brief overview of results from the completion of the study. We're very pleased with no real surprises. You might expect I think we all knew it was expensive to live here in Burlington. So, but there are a couple items that are of particular interest to me. But let me just begin by mentioning that the Housing Partnership, we partnered with Metropolitan Area Planning Council to assist with data collection from various sources. They also proctored a series of focus groups, surveys, as well as an open forum from a very diverse group of Burlington residents, as well as real estate professionals. So we had about 200 people participate. I think maybe some of you may have done so. If so, thank you. And I just wanted to, I want a very special thank you to Liz Bonaventure from the Planning Board, as our senior planner. Incredibly helpful to us throughout this process. We couldn't have done it without her help. So we hope we have a very short 3-minute video to sort of summarize the findings of the housing needs assessment, and then I have a couple of comments at the end, and then I'll get out of your hair. You can continue with your agenda. So we'll try this.
Many places in Massachusetts and
Around the country, it can be hard to find an affordable place to live. Rents and home prices are through the roof. To learn more about our town's housing challenges, the Burlington Housing Partnership Committee worked with MAPC to examine data about our housing and demographics, and also listened to the concerns of residents. The final result is a comprehensive housing needs assessment, and there are 5 key findings in the report. First, Burlington needs a greater variety of housing types. Nearly 2/3 of our town's housing stock is detached single-family homes, which tend to be both large and expensive. Smaller homes like townhouses, duplexes, and small multifamily buildings designed to blend into the town's existing character would make homeownership possible for young professionals, small households, and seniors looking to downsize. Since single-family homes make up most of Burlington's current housing stock, it's very difficult to buy a home in town. Today, someone would need nearly $140,000 in savings just for the down payment. And with rents through the roof as well, saving this much money is virtually impossible for many young families. By creating more housing options and expanding homeownership in Burlington, we can also become a more inclusive and equitable community, which is something that many of the residents in our focus groups and online survey told us is very important to them. And while creating different types of housing will expand what's known as lowercase a affordable housing, that is, housing that is affordable to median income residents, Burlington also needs more of what's known as capital A affordable housing. That is, deed restricted housing that is affordable to our lowest income residents, including seniors. For every 5 eligible households, the town currently has only 1 affordable housing unit. Without more housing options and capital A affordable housing, the Burlington community could change dramatically in the coming years. We could lose our seniors, our teachers, essential workers, and all the people who make our town vibrant and diverse.
Putting myself through school so I can hopefully afford it someday, even looking at what I would make as a nurse, I would still have to work very hard to try and stay in this community, which I just find it a little unfair because, I've grown up here, my daughter's growing up here, and I shouldn't be pushed away.
Our town is not unique in facing these housing challenges, but if we take action, we can work to make Burlington's housing more inclusive and meet the needs of both current and future residents. Visit the Burlington Housing Needs Assessment website to read the full report and learn what our town can do to address these challenges.
Yeah, there you go. I appreciate your attention to that little video there. Kerry Donahue will be having a more comprehensive report at the start of town meeting in September. And as we mentioned, the full report's available online if anybody would care to access that. There are 2 things that are of interest to me personally that I took away from the study. And we have here in Burlington, more than 1 in 4 households in Burlington are cost burdened. And what I mean by that, they're spending more than 30% of their income just to cover their housing costs. It's not just young folks, this is also our seniors on fixed incomes, property taxes, insurance, utilities are, eating up most of their monthly income, leaving little for folks who want to try and put some money aside for savings that maybe want to buy, food, prescription drugs. So those are all of a concern to me, and I think that's a pretty alarming statistic that more than 1 in 4 of our folks are struggling here. 48% of the people that rent, of homeowners that rent in Burlington are cost burdened. Some of them spending 50% of their monthly income to cover their housing costs. So I think that's interesting. And the other thing is they touched on it. They called it the lack of middle housing or workforce housing. Our teachers, our entry-level workers here in Burlington, our folks in the hospitality industry, they can't find housing here in Burlington. And in terms of economic development, this type of housing is key to our continued success as an economic powerhouse. Businesses large and small want to ensure that their employees can live in the area where they work. So those are 2 things that I intend to work on, and we've got some other ideas hopefully we'll be bringing to town meeting in the near future. Zoning is going to be critical to address some of these issues if we're going to make any headway into making Burlington a little more affordable. So we'll be, I'm sure, to be seeing you again in the future with some more specific recommendations. So I thank you for your time tonight. I know you have a busy agenda.
Any questions or comments for Mike? Brad?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There we go. Mike, are there any communities, I'm sure, as you said, this issue is not unique to Burlington. Are there any communities in this part of Massachusetts that have successfully addressed this problem, or that we could work toward or model?
There's some examples in the report, some examples of what other communities nearby have done to address this. I mean, don't get me wrong, we're doing pretty well here in Burlington. I think we're all aware that we're above that 10% threshold. So, I mean, we're not lacking behind our neighbors, but we could do better. I think with not too many, not too, it's not too big of a pill to swallow, I think, to make some improvements here.
Thank you.
Sonia, did you have something?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Selectman Runyon, I just first of all want to commend you on that noise. I want to commend you on working on this because I think it is critical, obviously, to the health of Burlington, right, and having a diverse stock of housing. Zoning is very important, as you said, because I think, one of the things that even in those first few minutes you can see is that the need for different types of housing other than just single-family housing is critical. Do you know, is the planning board, are they working on this with you? I mean, is this something that
The
you're
planning board is working on, you might be familiar with the state passed housing choice legislation last year. We are an MBTA community, and we are going to be required to create some multifamily zoning. The planning board is working very difficult to meet the timeline that the state has given us to present a plan, or at least a rough draft, and I think it's due by the end of this year. So that's something to keep an eye on. That's going to require vote of town meeting.
Yeah, I think sometimes people view multifamily housing as large apartment buildings, but they can be as simple as two-family homes and things like that just diversify the stock. The zoning bylaw and the general bylaw talks about the single-family houses that have accessory apartments on them and the percentages. It would be great if the planning board in conjunction with the select board could look at that. It hasn't been touched, I think, in years, that specific language.
It has not. Accessory dwelling units is a key piece of the housing choice legislation.
Yes.
Trying to make it easier for them to be added on to an existing house, or they can either be detached or detached. Interestingly enough, that would ease some of the burden for some families. And the report actually points out that it's these smaller 10-unit or less type of multifamily housing units that are more desirable in terms of meeting our needs.
100%.
So this should be a good document for a town meeting when the next development proposal comes forward. And if it doesn't quite, look like what our study has said, and there's some conversation to be had with the proposed development.
I think, and Mr. Chairman, if I can end with this for my comment is, if I put my chamber hat on for a minute and tell you that the business community would love to hear that the housing stock will change, because public transportation is such a challenge sometimes to get into Burlington, and because that middle stock, as you said, of people who are our front line of workers, whether that's teachers or nurses or things like that, they can't afford to live in the community, and a lot of times they don't have the public transportation means to get into the community. So the business community, I'm sure, would wrap their arms around assisting in that zoning as well.
I'm certain they would. I know every time the Secretary Keneally comes to Burlington, whether it's for money to help us complete the MWR project, whether it's a complete streets grant or it's a mass works grant, his remarks always bring up the fact that we have a housing crisis here in Massachusetts, and it needs to be addressed if we want to remain, king of the hill in terms of opportunities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Carrie?
Carrie Donahue, I'm Chair of the Housing Partnership Committee. I actually wanted to echo what Sonia said, and also one of the things that I think is outlined in the report about the workforce housing is a lot of times when these multifamily developments are proposed, people get worried about things like traffic and schools and things like that. And one of the things that the study outlines is that exactly as she said, a lot of the people who live in those would be people who are currently driving into town, right? So if they don't have to drive into town anymore, that's actually going to reduce traffic. And a lot of the people who move into multifamily are, in fact, young couples, young professionals who don't have children. And so typically what we find is that it's actually single family housing that increases more children going to schools. Small multifamily and even larger multifamily does not, in fact, put more children into school. So these are the sorts of nuances that I think we're hoping to tell people about as we unroll this study to the community and help them think a little bit more critically about the things that we can do to address our housing problems and the way that the solutions can affect the community in very positive ways. So I'm presenting this report next week at town meeting, and I'm really interested to hear the feedback that we get from the community and from town meeting members. And then, as Mike mentioned, there's a number of things that we can do going forward. But one of the things we're strongly considering is forming a municipal affordable housing trust that would give us a mechanism by which to pursue some of these projects and things that other communities have done to increase the housing in their town. So thank you for letting us talk to you about it.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else?
Anyone else?
Okay, I do see that on the upcoming warrant that there's also an article to make your committee be a permanent committee as opposed to it's currently an ad hoc committee, as I understand.
We're somewhat of an enigma. The committee was sort of hastily put together many years ago when a 40B proposal was presented to the town. We were kind of caught flat-footed, and so we never really got a formal recognition or there's very little documentation as to around the composition of the committee, what their charge is, who they're responsible. So we're just trying to, it's kind of a housekeeping thing. So just to make it more formal and.
Well, hopefully we can make you less of an enigma.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Do want to apologize. I intended to introduce some of our new people. Sadly, Kayla Newton, our recording secretary, has retired from the committee. But the good news is Jennifer Reale is our new recording clerk. So she's already on the job here and has solved our WebEx problem already. So thank you. We also have a couple departures from the committee. We have Gio Borganti has left. We thank her for her service with the Education Committee that she spent several years on. And also Phil Gallagher has left us. Phil has had a repeat engagement with the committee, and I like to describe him as my favorite person to disagree with. We welcome a couple new members. We have Shyam Bhattacharya, which I hope I didn't mangle too much, who has joined Mark Hardy on the Public Safety Committee, and not here tonight, but has literally been appointed today, is Chris Delaney, who's a returning member who will be joining Steve on the Education Committee. So those are all our personnel changes for now. I'm going to take one more thing out of order here, which is to move up Article 11, so Dr. Connie doesn't have to spend his whole evening with us here. This is the curriculum contract approval. Do we have a subcommittee report?
I do.
Thank you, Steve.
So this article is a non-financial article. The reason it's here before us tonight is because the schools would like to enter into a 6-year contract for their social studies curriculum. And in order for the school committee to sign a contract over 3 years, it needs town meeting approval. And so they're here, the warrant article is to get that approval. Back in the June 2020 timeframe, during the June town meeting for that year, the town meeting had approved a social studies curriculum warrant article for $90,000. And so the schools have now gone out, put that out for bid and have a contract. And so they can either spend $80,000 for I'm going to mess up the numbers, but essentially what it boils down to is that we can save quite a bit of money, approximately 180,000 by engaging into a 6-year contract as opposed to doing it on a per year basis. And so I'll let Dr. Conti go into the more specifics, but the subcommittee voted 4-0 in favor.
Thank you. Dr. Conti?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Moran did a very good job explaining that. This is, again, not a financial article. The financial article was in 2020, and we've been piloting different curricular programs. The state changed their social studies standards, their expectations of what we teach. We have to adjust to those standards. After looking at a bunch of programs for 2 years, we've selected a program and their pricing structures. There's printed material, but there's also a lot of digital curriculum. And so the publisher has put together a 6-year package for us. We're not going to change the curriculum in 6 years. The state won't change their standards in that 6-year time period. So the publisher tried to work with communities to do a 3+3, sign for 3, and then get 3 years free, but the Inspector General said that's a 6-year deal. So that's why we have to come back to town meeting, and we're asking you to support this. Again, the savings over those 6 years, instead of doing it annually, if we commit to the 6 years, we save $180,000. And we fit underneath the original warrant, so we're not going to be asking for any additional money.
Any questions or comments on that?
Mr. Chairman,
Mike?
Subcommittee?
4-0.
I did have one quick question, which is all the line items mention that there's 6-year options except for the study guides for all 3 years don't say a 6-year option. Is that a...
No, there'll probably be those are consumables. Most curricular programs have annual consumables, but those would be in our operating budget. So this is just coming out of the warrant article.
But the quote doesn't specify what the cost would be after. The quote specifies that it's free to the first year, but doesn't say what it would cost after that.
I'm not sure what the cost will be after that, but most of our programs have some sort of annual materials cost that we build into the operating budget.
Okay, you're aware of it is the important thing. Great.
motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, we'll try a different strategy of going in position order here. Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Kyan?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. That's 14-0-0.
Very efficient.
All right, well, I like that new strategy. Thank you for suggesting that last time, Roger.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm pushing off the Community Preservation Act because we are waiting for someone who's at the Historical Commission right now. So we'll come back to that since I don't think anyone else is waiting for that right now. I don't see anyone online either. Okay, so we'll do that. How about we let Chief Brown get out of here next? We'll go with Article 4, the police station feasibility study. Is there a subcommittee report on that, Mike?
Subcommittee was 2 in favor. 0 against.
Okay.
Oh, the report, I'm sorry.
Did you have anything else you wish to mention? Or?
Yeah.
Likes it.
Very, very concise.
Very succinct. Let's vote.
So, Cheyenne and I went and met with Chief Brown and toured the police station Monday night, 2 nights ago. And, we discussed the article, referring now to the capital request form. So basically, we're looking to have a feasibility study for a new police station. It's $150,000 funding source, proposed funding source is stabilization. priority rankings is high, health and safety, legal requirements. And there's, the study's expected to take 8 to 12 months, at which point in time there'll be a recommendation for the town to consider coming out of that study. Some of the backup that was provided kind of explains the different components of the assessment study. Referring to one sent by John Denizio, talks about 4 components. First, a space needs assessment and space program will be part of that. Site assessments, so there's a couple of sites in mind. We'll continue to try to expand those options and look at, whatever sites may work for a new police station. Schematic design of the police station, and then finally the study would come up with some cost estimation that would help guide us for the potential project with that. In talking with Chief Brown, we got some information that was interesting. Since 2020, we have spent $115,000, at least that amount. I think there were some expenses that we couldn't really calculate easily, but $115,000 just addressing critical issues within the police station. So we're spending money to put Band-Aids on major issues there. The other thing that is made an impression, Shine and I walked around with the chief and toured the facility, all the different floors and rooms, and kind of looked at nooks and crannies and all kinds of things so we could really understand what was going on there. And I'll start off by saying, when you look at the outside of the police station, it doesn't really look that bad. It looks okay. Once you go in and you start walking around, you really start to understand the limitations and problems of the current building. The most obvious issues that you'll see immediately are major issues with water, including like leaking from rain, issues with plumbing within the building. The plumbing is, for some reason, in a horrendous state of things put in the wrong place, things done incorrectly, all kinds of issues. But there's been flooding in nearly every room in the police station. You can see the water stains in the ceiling, on the walls, on the floor. You see it everywhere. One of the biggest issues that presented is there's mold. There's mold. You look at the ceiling panels and the grates up in the ceilings for ventilation, and you can see black spots and stains and things like that. So there are problems up in the ceilings and the walls and the plumbing that are going to be difficult to deal with. There's also electrical issues that are going to be a problem also due to things getting wet. The major panels within the main electrical closet have gotten wet, and it's not something that can be easily repaired because it's a public safety building. So in order to repair some of that stuff, it's a big deal. You got to figure, we're going to take the police station offline. How are we going to get back up for this? It's becomes a problem even solving some of the problems. Other issues we talked about, just the layout within the police station, the way it was originally designed. Maybe it worked for a little while, but there's certain layouts and corridors that don't work well from a safety perspective, where people may be brought into the police station that have been arrested or whatever, and they have to actually go through areas. They're brought in through a side door. They go through areas where they may run into civilian workers in the police station. They may run into regular Burlington residents who, for some reason, are in that area, like Cheyenne and I were. They may be going by police officers who are doing other types of work, and they have arms on them. So you can get a sense that it's not really a safe way to move within the police station. There are also areas where there's kind of like a booking room, or I think that's what it's called, where people are brought in that, you know, are picked up from the police, brought into the police station for whatever reason. And it's not really a secure room. It's not safe. There's a piece of the plexiglass, just kind of a plexiglass separator from an officer who's going to be doing the booking to the space where the other person is, that's been cracked because someone grabbed the phone and smashed it against the plexiglass, cracking that. So I mean, you can just look around and see they might be able to reach up and grab electrical wires that are exposed in that room, yank those. I mean, if somebody went kind of crazy, you know, maybe had some issues, that there's lots of things that could go wrong. So, you know, things like that are not designed well. And then because of some of the plumbing issues, certain areas you can't even get to plumbing that's been done. It's been buried behind HVAC later construction, so that there are at least 2 of the cells in the jail. You cannot get to the plumbing for that jail cell. The plumbing has failed, so those jail cells are not usable. So you got different issues like that. There's a training room on the first floor. That's same thing, not usable because it's too wet down there. First floor, kind of like semi-basement level. It's damp. Floor gets slick. You can see where the walls are showing, you know, water damage. The ceiling showing water damage. In the locker room down on that lower level, it's very kind of musty, kind of dark, dank, you know, unpleasant place, I'd say, to go and change. And as the chief was explaining to us, there's been a lot of expense just on the uniforms themselves, because being in that environment, they get mold on them and things like that. The lockers don't have proper ventilation. We looked at one of the open lockers. You could literally, there was a belt in there, you could literally see mold on the belt. So it's just those type of situations. So just, you know, that type of tour in there makes it very clear that the police station is just in tough shape. So that's the whole reason behind the need of a feasibility study.
Thank you. Chief Brown, would you like to add anything?
Well, thank you, Mike. That was a very good presentation. What I would say to anybody is to hear about it, to read about it, really doesn't do it justice. Anybody who wants to come in and see it, by all means, give me a call. I'll walk you around, because I think it does add a layer of credibility to the argument. If you see it firsthand, you go in and experience the smells that we're going through right now from 4 plumbing floods that have happened over the past 2 weeks in our front lobby, where we had to shut down the front lobby bathrooms. So there's a lot of issues, but I'm happy to address anything specifically. The only other thing I would bring up right now that I've touched on, and I'll just glance over it, is there are a lot of security issues as well, and I don't want to put them out in a public forum out of fear that somebody could decide, hey, let's test it and try to breach it. But I did point it out to the subcommittee the other day, and I'm happy to point those out to anybody who would like to come in and see it from the committee. So, thank you.
Thank you. Brad?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we were commiserating with Chief Kent, 12 years ago over the state of things over there. So this has not come as a surprise, and but two questions. One perhaps to Mr. Denizzi. Maybe I'm just showing my age. I remember way back when these design studies were coming in at 40, 50,000, and then 60 to 80, and now it's a full jump to 150. Am I just showing my age? It's just the going cost, or is it just the complications of this particular project?
I'll pass on whether you're showing your age, but I would say that this is what they cost. There's a little bit built in here for us to, because it's going to be multiple sites that we're going to look at. There's a little bit built in there to do some soil testings if we need to, and because we don't know how many sites it's going to be that we're looking at. So I will say that nothing to add on the why to do it, but the what the elevator pitch for what is a feasibility study and why this is costing a little bit more. They do the needs assessment, they meet with Chief Brown and his staff, and they say, oh, okay, what are all the different programs that we have, the different departments that we do, and that's gonna say how big to make it. And then they're gonna say, they're gonna go to schematic design, and they're gonna say, this is what it's gonna look like. Then they're gonna do site assessments, and they're gonna say, this is where it can go, and then how much it can be. So if you had to tell somebody what it is in a minute, that's what I would tell you. Your original question was to why the price is double what it used to be, and we did get an estimate from a couple different folks that do this, and this was in the ballpark. We did add a little bit, they were saying maybe the 125 range. We want to make sure that we have enough money to do it right if we have multiple sites that we're looking at, so that we don't run out of money and have to shortchange it.
And one more, if I may. So you're touching on my second question. I see the study is going to be looking at multiple sites, and that's, for those of us involved in town government, that's a typical lunch topic of where would we put the new police station. So are you guys providing the list from I believe we've had a facilities committee over the years. There is a document on that. Do you provide the typical list of candidates? Are they doing a full, a wider search, perhaps, or what's in the plans?
Okay, well, we haven't got official approval from the select board, but I think you guys have all been in town for a while and been around and know that we have very limited options in terms of municipal property. So I would tell you from my perspective, we're considering the original site, possibly with the addition of the sculpture park land to be rezoned. The other option that we are considering is the Vinebrook treatment plant on Middlesex Turnpike, which, once we get hooked up to the MWRA fully, we'll be abandoning that plant. It's actually a very nice piece of land, west side of Burlington, kind of a busy part of town, and right down the street from the new fire station.
Turning left out of there is tough.
I guess if you have blue lights, it's a little
I was
easier.
gonna say.
Might be easy.
Well, if you have a detail.
And just the other aspect of this is we plan to, with Whitney's assistance, do a request for information to property owners in town within particular corridors. Once we're able to determine what the appropriate amount of acreage is, we'll do an announcement to property owners. Does anybody looking to sell X amount of acres of land within these particular corridors? And we'll just see what's out there and what property owner may be willing to sell the town land at that time, just to evaluate if there are any other additional sites within the community that are worth us looking at.
That sounds good. We'll keep our fingers crossed. Thank you.
Anything else?
Move to approve?
Second.
Thank you. Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Roger? Rob?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Cheyenne?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
And chair votes yes. That's 14-0-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And, Mr. Boyden, don't worry, I realize you're here. We have not done it yet, so we'll get to you. Okay, why don't we move on to the contracts here? Article 5 is the firefighters, or did you want to?
What do you want to do, Melissa, next?
Article 10?
Article 10?
All right. The enigmatically named Article 10 form-based code creation. Town Hall 1 had that.
Yep.
Do you have a report, David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, form-based code creation. This is approval for an $80,000 to fund consulting work and related costs for this purpose. Funding will come from stabilization. The reality is this is the only funding mechanism right now, but that will require a 2/3 vote. First of all, let me say when I first looked at the article and knew we had it, I had to Google what is form-based code creation.
We had lots of
I didn't
questions
know what
about
that
that.
was.
Yes.
So in doing that, it means regulating land development to achieve a specific urban form-based code fosters predictable built results and a high-quality public realm by using physical rather than separation of uses. Then I read Melissa's, and it's made a lot more sense. So Frank and I met with Melissa and the administration for quite a while on this. Melissa will do a much better job explaining all of this to you, so I'm going to defer to her at some point, but just in a couple of quick points. This request is for consulting to service for us to look and consider rezoning initiative for the Middlesex Turnpike and the Mall Road area. So we're obviously in a very changing world, and we need to be in the forefront of what's going on in that area. And the fact of the matter is, rezoning is probably going to be part of that. This is a massive area. It's about 500 acres. And there's about 100 acres of what they look at as potentially developable sites within that. So there's a whole gamut of things we need to look at. And like we said, be on the forefront of deciding how that land should be used for the next 20 years. We've done a great job as far as where it has been, but obviously the world is changing quite a bit. Our commercial sector is just so critical and so important to us that we need to do that. The town of Burlington collaborated with Mass Development under a site readiness grant for this specific area. It's entitled the Burlington 128 District, and you can see that report online. I did get to read that through. Thank you. The town received a grant of $50,000 from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. Melissa has gone out already to meet with some potential consultants, and we figured the cost is going to be about $130,000. So the net to us would be then $80,000 after the grant that was received. So in short, we would like to be developing our vision now, and so that this reality can be potential. So like this town studied and eventually approved a redevelopment of the Northwest Park, and we looked at that. This is going to be a lot more complicated. There's a lot more owners, there's a lot more land, but we need to be ready. We need to be ready for it. So subcommittee voted 2-0 in favor of supporting it. Through the chair, I'd like to open up to Melissa because she does an unbelievable job in really describing this all to us. I just don't think I could do it justice.
Absolutely. Melissa?
Well, thank you, David. I think you captured it quite well, actually. So, as many of you remember, just for the record, I'm Melissa Tintopolis. I work as the Economic Development Director. And when the position was open, when I came on board, we identified, our economic development objectives, really. And one of those, aside from our life science cluster development, town center, the area in the focus was the mall, and this was prior to the pandemic. So it was really at the changing face of retail. How do we, look to the future to ensure that this corridor remains strong? It is the lion's share of our property tax revenue that supports our services. So how do we ensure that is sustainable and endures, not just for our generation, but for future generations? The pandemic hit. Obviously, the upturn and kind of the shifts in society across the board with remote work, hybrid work, and shifts in our daytime population and what that means for getting together and retail. So these are additional factors. And kind of intersecting with that at the same time, factors to consider had also come up with housing, as Selectman Runyon had mentioned at the beginning. It's critical across the state, and then issues of climate change have becoming more important to communities across the nation. So these are factors that are going to be important as we look to our land development patterns. And what we have in control is our land use policy, how we regulate land and how we shape development. That doesn't cost us anything to make the policies, and we can shape our future through these policies, but it requires a lot of upfront work and community engagement to begin with. So as David mentioned, Part of my work over the last year and a half has been to work with Mass Development, which is a state organization to support communities and kind of help work with them to really kind of shape their vision for what they want to see. And that's several of you I see had participated on some of the community forums that helped develop this vision. So in the report, I would say in the backup for town meeting, and there is a link, and it kind of links you to our final report that came out in August 2022. And that really kind of, I would say, encompasses the vision of what the community had really talked about in terms of walkability, sustainable development principles, and how we could accommodate some, strategic amounts of housing. But in order to take the next step, that is why we are here today, is that these are great suggestions and ideas, but they only matter when they are in the bylaw and they are in a regulatory framework that really signals to the developer what explicitly they can do in our community. So the hard work is to do this community engagement and craft new zoning for town meeting to consider next year. And what's before you is the proposal for funding that effort, which I would be heading up over the next 12 months. We plan to have a steering committee, a cross-section of planning, property owners, select board select board members, and any other, kind of interested community members. We probably have to limit it. We haven't kind of got to that point of what the steering committee will look like, but that will be our sounding board as we move through every kind of stage of the process. So I hope that answers most of the questions, and I'm happy to answer additional questions as well.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Mike?
Mr. Chairman, so the funds will be expended for, is there consultants that will be involved?
Mm-hmm. So the idea is that we would hire a consultant that helps to craft the zoning, and it would be part of a team that would support us for the outreach, because whereas the developer usually comes with their legal team and says, hey, this is what we want to do, as a community, we need to work to engage the community. We've done a little bit of that already with the vision, but then we want to ensure this is, where the direction we would like to go, because a lot of what we found out in our visioning is different for Burlington, and I'll say that. It looks at infill development, so it looks at, of those 500 acres that David mentioned, we've identified 100 acres within that are primarily surface parking lots, and 100 acres that could unlock for infill or smart growth, only if you have the appropriate land use policies in place. Otherwise, we will because we are in a very, kind of geographically advantageous area with our access and proximity, we will continue to see development. So I don't want to say that that's not happening or that's not there, but it will continue to be kind of ad hoc and negotiated, development agreements will be negotiated parcel by parcel. And what we're trying to do through this process is create more of a cohesive plan that also focuses on the public realm. So going back to form-based code, the title is a little, I think we should have said the mall zone rezoning initiative, but the mechanism is called a form-based code that we would most likely use. But really, at the end of the day, it's a regulatory framework, just like any zoning.
Steve?
Just a quick question. What was the breakdown again on just the cost and where it was coming from? Is it just 80,000 from the stabilization fund, or is it broken down in separately?
So they received a grant for 50,000.
Right.
The remaining amount that we're asking for here is 80,000.
And it's coming from stabilization?
And that aid has to come from stabilization. So like the administration has said, if this passes, the idea would be once free cash is certified, we would replace it.
Right.
But this is the only really funding mechanism in order to
So it'll require a 2/3 vote at town meeting.
Correct.
Brad?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, so for the benefit of newer members to the committee, there was a day where this committee really pushed back against any request for funding at the September town meeting. So I should have, I'm not picking on you, I should have mentioned that when we were asking questions of the chief. But just so I understand the need for the money right now, rather than waiting to January, May, is there going to be other proposals and you want to be ready for perhaps some changes in zoning at May town meeting? So that's the need for the money now.
In a year, the project we hope to go to town meeting would be in next September.
Asking for money in September?
Zoning
Just the
changes.
zoning, just the zoning changes. Okay, that makes sense. I'll support this. Thank you.
Roger?
So the timeline of this seems a little bit skewed with the effort that's needed to satisfy the MBTA communities. And there's some things parallel, and since the Mall Road is one of the corridors that they care about, probably obvious that there's gonna be a bunch of coordination across everybody who's involved, so that the end result here meets those requirements, because those requirements are actually gonna have to get nailed down sooner to satisfy the state's requirements.
Correct. We're working with planning, Kristen and Liz, with this initiative. We're aware of the MBTA requirements. I thought that the date, and I'll double check this, for adopting the zoning under the housing choice was a little further out, but the intention is to look at this as an opportunity to meet the criteria and so we would be accepted under that program.
Thanks.
Frank?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have three things I want to say. First, I want to just pick up on something that Melissa said that I think is very pivotal. Out of this 500 acres, they're estimating that there's maybe 90 acres it's not a green field, but it's ripe for redevelopment and the least encumbered with existing things that are there. And if you look at that amount of land, what we're trying to not do is have, for each one of these projects that were to come along, have a PDD for every one, and then try to somehow customize those to meet the needs and the aspirations that we have for this huge district for redevelopment. And our aspirations and needs have everything to do with the look and feel of it, the incorporation of better people flow, better mixed use, more respect for open space and recreation, et cetera. So this is a very complicated thing. And I think it's actually urgent that we take the next step, which is to go from basically a lot of concept work that's been done. And if you look at the documents and the YouTubes that are available, there's a lot of good work that's been done on how to create this kind of zoning. Form really means that you give form, fit, and function in a uniform way to something that's different than the way we've been zoning and that meets the going forward needs. So I think it is actually urgent that we let them get started. And I think we're going to have to walk and chew gum along the way because, as Roger and others point out, there are competing interests that'll need possibly more immediate attention than this can be in place enough to give it. So it will be difficult, and I think we have to get started. The last thing I just wanted to say, how much this is ultimately going to cost to get all of these bylaws written, we don't really know. This is the beginning of a really complex set of bylaws to define sufficiently this kind of development area for the 128 district. But I think this is a small amount of money that will let them get a long way towards at least having a skeleton draft of what the major bylaw structural pieces need to be, what they'd look like. It has everything to do with spacing, corridors, mixed use, just basic infrastructure things you must consider in terms of size and location to get us where we want to go. And I would say that the sooner we let them start to work on this as a a unified committee and put things to paper and get feedback, the better off would be. So that's I obviously we supported it at the subcommittee, and I'm really glad to see this, and I hope that town meeting sees the merits of this in the long run. This is not a short-term endeavor. It is complex, and it is going to be very different than the way we've typically done the zoning so far, and maybe get us out of PDD nightmares in these 100+ acres that will get built out. I guess that's all I've got. Thank you.
Sonny?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of quick comments, I guess, and maybe a question for you, Melissa. And a side note. Side note is congratulations to you for what you're doing in the town center. It's to be commended that there were so many people coming together. It's a great feather in your hat, I will say, to see the community getting together at those beer gardens. So congratulations for that. The other thing I wanted to ask you is about this, and to kind of piggyback on what Frank was saying. I do think it's going to take all of a year and then some to get this going, so the sooner the better with the zoning. My question for you is, does the underlying zoning stay the same, and does this kind of zoning overlay it, or is it a full-on change of zoning on Middlesex Turnpike? Or is that something that's to be discussed?
No, the proposal will be new zoning.
Okay, great. So my second, I think that's great, by the way. So my second question for you is, once I hope town meeting passes this and the discussion happens, is it the will of the community to be reaching out to these property owners in hopes that they hold for us? I would imagine that they understand that there'd be some zoning changes, and I don't know what the technicality of that is, Paul. Like, if somebody brings forward something while this zoning is changing, is there a freeze of that? Do you know, like, how does that really, until the zoning is changed, it would just make sense that maybe if this in fact is passed, I hope, next week, and the work starts happening, that the reach out happens to those property owners so that they know, there are going to be a lot of opportunities really that aren't available to them now, and maybe would be beneficial for both the private sector and the community. Is that something that happens? It doesn't freeze till it starts, right? Or once it opens at the planning board is when it could potentially freeze, if I remember correctly.
I do believe that property owners, developers would be able to move forward with, under the current basis. I think we saw something recently at the Marriott where they subdivided the property for a life sciences building, which we're really excited about. It's a little bit before we're ready to do this initiative, so I think it will move forward at that point. I know that within the public listening sessions that are available online, we also had a lot of participation from local developers, and we've met with several of them in the quarter, and they're really excited about the possibilities that the new zoning could bring to the area.
Right, because I think that's fantastic, because it would be wonderful for them to be included early, only because they'll now know what the potential could be, and maybe give some of their feedback, and maybe hold on any potential development they're thinking about, so that it can marry in with the vision that the town is working on.
Oops. So yes, Sonia, from our visioning process, we were able to engage with, I think, almost every property owner in the corridor, shy a few of them, but all of the majority of the major property owners. So they're aware of the vision. They're, like Paul said, for the most part, it's exciting because it does, unlock some potential and more flexibility potentially on each site. We heard they want to be involved, so we will be giving them, the steering committee is one group, but we'll obviously have many opportunities to gauge the private property owners as well. One example is Brixmore, who came to us to, kind of talk a little bit further about this, and they have leases. They want to know, when to kind of prune their leases to start thinking about the future, because as Paul said, it's a long-term economic development, long-term community plan as we really think about this. But we set this stage for a form and a shape of how we want to grow. more so than kind of the more piecemeal approach where, you know, individual property owners just kind of come and say, this is what we want. And we say, this is what you can do. This is what we would like in terms of our future, so.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Frank, is your hand up from before, or is that a new hand? Old hand. All right, very good.
Move to approve?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, this for $80,000 from stabilization. Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Yes.
Rob? Ed?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Cheyenne?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. That's 14-0-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I wanted to backtrack just a second. On the Article 4 police station, was that from stabilization also?
Has to be.
Yes.
Yes.
I assume so. Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure we had the source on that.
You get to write that in at the last moment, actually, when you sign the warrant. But
It's good to have a hint. Okay, why don't we move on to contracts? So Article 5, firefighters contract. Do we have a subcommittee report on that, Mike?
We do. Cheyenne and I met with John, talked about the firefighters contract that was approved. I think you guys may have the high-level information, but it's a 3-year deal, fiscal year 23, 24, 25. The economic package includes 2.5% increase for all 3 years, so that's in line with some of the other contracts done recently. In terms of other economic impact, there's some small stipend changes, a new stipend for people to be able to certify the breathing apparatus, I think four of those for the shifts, and then a change in the EMT stipend. The non-economic, some training requirements for a role called senior man on duty. Needs to have completed a course to qualify for the person, the senior person who would be senior man on duty needs to have taken a course in order to qualify for that. And then, as noted here, policy changes for cybersecurity. As cybersecurity policies are changed, want to be able to implement those changes within the firefighters without having to go and negotiate, because the changes may come, throughout, in the middle of the contract, let's say. Subcommittee voted 2-0 to approve.
Anything for administration?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just add that there was also a requirement added for annual core checks that will allow us to continue to bill Medicaid for certain ambulance runs, that without that, we wouldn't be able to bill for those, and that's to the tune of 6 figures. So that was good. And I just, while I'm on camera in front of people, I just want to thank the firefighter group for the hard work in this. We didn't think we would make September town meeting, but we're very grateful we were. Everybody worked hard and was very professional during what's not an easy process. Every time we're here, we talk about that there's no winners in this. Everybody kind of walks away with a little bit of hurt feelings. So I just want to thank them while we're on camera. So.
You've never described an easy negotiation.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
Move to approve?
Second.
I just had a quick question, actually. Now that I ask me, I believe in the past there are some open issues to get the ALS all squared away with contracts. Is that all in place at this point? There's
We've
nothing.
been running ALS since the early months of the pandemic, so.
Okay, I had the impression there was something left over, but I'm wrong, obviously. Excellent.
Where money comes and goes to, there's stuff left over, right?
Okay.
It's all going to an enterprise account for. Sorry, I couldn't hear you, Roger. Sorry. Since John mentioned ALS and as I understand it, the charges that are made from the ambulance runs are going into an enterprise account, and we haven't yet decided how that supports the budget.
Yep,
So it's
we're
it's an
almost
issue.
there. Yep, we have enough of a history that we feel like we'll be able to implement the usage of that fund to offset budget increases moving forward.
Brad?
And what was the amount again?
So the amount I have on that is $186,216 from negotiated settlements.
Okay, thank you.
So important to note, everybody here knows, but for anybody, for the millions watching at home, it doesn't actually increase the budget at all. It's, that money's already in the budget, it's just in a different line. We just move it into the fire line so that we can pay the contract.
The millions, thank you. Any other discussion? Rob?
Who is deciding on the cybersecurity policy? What is it?
So the cybersecurity policy is done by, was recommended by ISAC. I believe still in draft form.
No, the cybersecurity policy was accepted by the select board.
Okay, yeah, so the cybersecurity policy that we are talking about with them is the one that went to select board, which I thought was in draft, but apparently not. What we're doing is having the acknowledgement that they accept the cybersecurity policy, and as long as there is no, any additions that don't change work conditions, so something that would require someone to do 8 hours of training at home, barring any of that, then we wouldn't have to go back and negotiate anything. So it's an acknowledgement to accept the cybersecurity policy into the contract.
By reference.
And,
I was going to say, sorry, it's included in the contract by reference.
correct, so that we, so assuming that this is gonna continue to be a little fluid and change over time, we don't wanna have to every single time go back. And, you know, we have this with all of our unions and we talk about it, and it's gonna look different for each one of them, because there's gonna be some departments or union members that never log into our system, don't have an email, and holding them to the same requirements doesn't make much sense. So it will be a little fluid with all of the unions, but we're on it, we're talking with them, we're, you know, acknowledging that it exists, they're acknowledging that it exists, and we're making sure we're moving forward.
Thank you for the clarification.
Is this the first department to accept it?
No, both police unions have already. And I
Excellent.
say, it's really acknowledging that the policy exists and that we're operating in some way, maybe not to the letter of it, because like I said, it's not gonna be the same for everybody.
Great, thank you.
Great. Okay, let's move to our vote. Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Roger,
Roger.
yes.
Rob? You're on top of it. Ed? Yes. Chris?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Cheyenne?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
And chair votes yes, that's 14-0-0. All right, I believe Article 6, the municipal employees contract is withdrawn. Okay, and Article 7, the DPW contract is withdrawn. And Article 8, the A&P plan is withdrawn. Which brings us to Article 9, the part-time plan.
Yep.
Which is David.
Yep.
Town Hall.
To fund the part-time compensation plan, the amount totals $8,244, I believe, and again, same thing, this is being funded out of negotiated settlements. These are our part-time workers. They're agreeing to a one-year 2.5% increase, as is similar to the other contracts that we've seen. The seasonal workers, it's a slightly higher number, it's just under 3%, but that's, again, in order to keep pace with the minimum wage laws and what it takes to attract the seasonal summer workers. I guess they had a tough time filling a lot of positions this year, as they're competing with the likes of Dunkin' Donuts and other places that are paying a lot more. So, but the total is at $8,244. Subcommittee voted 2-0 in favor.
Does the administration have something on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to add that the seasonal workers, that is more than 2.5 to keep pace with unemployment. That's just at the first step. This would be like summer help at DPW or rec. Only the first step is at the same level as unemployment. The others are higher. So just wanted to get that out there.
Okay.
Motion to approve. Second.
Any further discussion?
And do you have an amount?
The amount on that is $8,244 from negotiated settlements. Okay, vote on this. Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Yes. Doug?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
And Frank?
Yes.
You guys are very good. And chair votes yes, that's 14-0-0. I'd like to thank Brad for being the trendsetter on all these votes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to move on to the Community Preservation Act. This is an item on the agenda. It is not for town meeting. There was a request for Ways and Means to discuss and potentially take a position as to whether to support or not support the Community Preservation Act, which, as you know, is on the town ballot in November for the town to decide if it would like to join the Community Preservation Act or not. We have with us today Bill Boyven, who is a proponent of voting yes on this. Mr. Boyden, would you like to say anything regarding this?
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for allowing me to speak. Sorry I was late, but I was at the Historical Commission on the same subject, and they had questions, and they deserved answers. So, the CPA passage would represent a significant change to our town's financial governance. It will bring a new revenue stream, we estimate, of over $2 million a year to help fund program areas such as building and renovating new recreation facilities, purchase of lands, adjoining conservation areas, creating more senior housing options, or preservation of historical properties. It will allow the town to invest in projects that often don't even make it to the warrant because the cost is too high, or the projects must compete with school, fire, police, DPW, and other mandatory expenses. I see two main advantages to funding projects, the types of projects with the CPA funds. First is that it will create a dependable revenue stream for the allowable program areas. Look, inflation continues to dilute available, budget funds. We're already hearing talk of the town discussing perhaps cutting back on some services like trash collection and things like that in order to cope. Projects like improving recreation areas or affordable housing for seniors have to compete with funds for adequate school staffing or town water treatment and supply. The Community Preservation Act will provide a dependable fund each and every year that cannot be diverted for any other purposes. The second major benefit I see is that there's a state match of the funds that are collected that is very significant. Last year, the matching rate was 43.8%. Now, that percentage isn't guaranteed every year, it varies. But that means projects that do get funded come at a savings to our taxpayers of over 30% of what it would cost using the traditional budget process. I know the Ways and Means Committee is well aware that the commercial sector pays over 60% of our taxes in this community. They will also pay 60% of the local funds that go into the CPA. So because of that, we've had multiple discussions with the Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce. They see many potential benefits in projects that the CPA could fund. They told us that amenities such as walking paths and bicycle paths and affordable housing would help them attract and retain workers. Burlington businesses are in serious competition for employees with our neighboring communities, and CPA will help them compete. And then anyone can submit proposal of projects for CPA expenditures. Individuals, boards, commissions, businesses, schools. Once this passes, I think we'll see an interesting and productive parade of beneficial proposals for the use of the CPA local funds. And like any other expenditure, it will come via a warrant article, and Ways and Means Committee will get to do their review of the warrant article and indicate their endorsement or lack thereof to town meeting. So CPA represents a new revenue stream specific to targeted areas, independent of the traditional budgeting process, but still subject to town meeting approval. The Community Preservation Act has been hugely successful in several of our neighboring communities. There's a total of 189 communities throughout the Commonwealth that are now participating. And I know I've mentioned this before, but I think it's a big positive that, there is a mechanism for opting out. And in 20 years the CPA's existed, not one of those communities have ever opted out. There was a handful that actually managed to get it on the ballot whether to opt out, and it was soundly defeated each time. And several communities have raised their percentage from the 1.5% they started with higher. So we respectfully request the support of this committee in passing the November 8 ballot question to bring the Community Preservation Act to Burlington. And if anyone would like more information about the CPA, we do have a website, yescpaburlington.org. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bill. Any comments or questions? Doug?
So, one, I struggle with this committee taking a stand on it. I'm not sure I can say why exactly, except I think that we work very hard in our budgeting. And on one side, yes, this creates an additional $2 million in revenue that can be used for very specific things. On the other hand, every year we cut things out of the budget to the level of $2 million or more, because we're trying to budget responsibly and we're trying to live up to what the residents of the community expect. And so, with all due respect, you made the comment that those things like recreation and historic preservation are forced to compete against things like water and fire and police and education. They should, because it all comes from the same pot. And the fact that, this is an additional tax, if you want to call it that. It's an additional way to raise money, and no matter how you look at it, it takes away that capacity if we're trying to be responsible with our budgeting, because you're asking for more money from each resident. And I think we could do some really cool things if we asked for $75 more for each resident to pay for a lot of things. So we could do that for the new police station, and then we could say, well, we need $75 for another new thing, and we don't. The reason that our police officers are working in a building that 12 years ago we said this is embarrassing, I'm fairly horrified by that. And now that we have our employees that work in a moldy, gross building, and we just keep going down the road every year because it's not fitting in and we need more money and it's not a good time. But now we can say that we can raise this, I just think that it's not responsible. I personally think those things should compete against it. And then the reason that they don't always get funded is because in that choice, we decide that it'd be nice. There are a lot of things that would be great to have, but this town, at least historically, has been very conservative. And I think when it comes to recreation, I think you'd be hard pressed to name things that this community has come forward and said, we'd like this thing. We have $1 million football field going in today. And I think that you could say that for most of the things. The fact that the money is prescribed, at least 10% of it, it's all divided among 3 specific areas, and that 10% of it, and I struggle mostly with the historic, because that is 10 times what this committee votes every year, and for that budget. And so to now say that it's worth going up by a factor of 10 on what we've always said, this is how much that this community is comfortable in spending on historic preservation. I just think you're going to see waste. I think that I just struggle with it when I look at all the things that we've put off and we continue to put off, even in education. I think we're going to face a dose of reality in the next couple of years with our school budgets. And with, you know, I think we're gonna be looking at some tough decisions about budgeting. And so I feel in that sense that this kind of puts things to the front of the line and kind of cuts the line, and it's going to hurt us in other areas. If we're being responsible, we're asking people to pay more money. It doesn't matter what box it ends up going in. It all comes out of the same big piece of pie. So I struggle with that.
Can I counter or respond to some of that?
I'd like to let Doug finish first.
All right, sorry. I thought you had.
I just think that the competition that we're bypassing is actually critical.
Okay.
That's my.
Do we have any other committee comments? Chris?
So I'm going to respectfully disagree because, and I've only been on this board now for almost a year, but one of the things that I think we do lack in this town is the vision to do some great things over a long period of time when it comes to some of these pots of money. And because we do not have the availability to tap into some of these resources at town, we think smaller and smaller projects and smaller things that, yes, they're still important, but, you know, one of the ones I struggled with last year was the billboards for putting them up at the parks. And yes, they're important, but why are we not thinking bigger? Why are we not thinking more long-term? And this has that ability to do that. I will also disagree with you when it comes to waste, because the way that the CPA is set up, we don't actually have to spend the money. We can carry it over year to year. It is not something that has to be spent year to year. It is something that is voted on by a CPA committee, then it is sent to town meeting. So we still have the say as a community over how we want to do that. And I think my last point is we have struggled on what the vision is for Burlington. We hear it from our constituents, we hear it from our neighbors. We heard it just not 2 seconds ago when we want to rezone how Burlington Mall wants to look. We want to think more about what the vision for Burlington is, and I don't think we focus enough on recreation. I don't think we focus enough on historical. I don't think we focus enough on where we could actually be spending the money. And yes, there are always going to be good reasons to spend it for police, for fire, for schools. But all of these towns that have joined, not one has left. And that's because they see the benefit. We're talking major cities. We're talking Boston. We're talking Lowell. Worcester has it on the ballot coming up. Natick has it on the ballot. Towns are wanting to join. They're not wanting to leave because they see the benefits of thinking longer term, saving up money 2-3 years. That's $6 million. What do we want to then do as a town for $6 million? And we still have that say and that control. Instead, we're just paying these taxes that are going to these other communities. Yes, it is going to leverage more for the rest of us here, and that does need to be something we consider. $75 a year is a lot of money for people, and is a lot of extra money. So we do have some mechanisms that controls for people who are economically disadvantaged, but yes, it is a tax levy. But if we can't keep sitting here and talking about the vision for our community and then not want to actually think how we're going to put some money aside to start to proactively do that when a lot of the measures that we have come in front of us talk about the vision and talk about the future.
Roger, I think you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's how salient a point it is. I guess I was going to point out that one of the things in terms of funding mechanism that Burlington and towns in general don't have is a way to accumulate funds over multiple years. There's just, except for a few specific things like health, the stabilization fund, et cetera. CPA does provide that mechanism to carry over and accumulate funds. So it does have some feature that we don't have today, in addition to the change in the sort of the difference in the way decisions get made. My other kind of question was more of, should Ways and Means take a position on this? And I guess from a responsible point of view, I'd say probably yes, because we do want to be involved in the decisions about finances and how they get made. And I'm pretty sure we don't all agree, but we don't always, actually tonight we've agreed about almost everything unanimously, but in the long run we don't. I mean, capital projects definitely have a lot more discussion. I know I'm personally in favor of the CPA, and I think it will have a lot of benefits. We will be a little hard pressed to figure out at what point the historical allocation can really reinforce, Burlington as a community. because I think, but we actually, we haven't really talked to the historical commission about that. I'm sure they're getting ideas, and that's probably a good thing. One of the uses is housing, and I noted that Mr. Runyon said when he was here that they're considering creating a housing trust fund, which would also be a multi-year mechanism to accumulate funds. I don't know exactly how those two things would intertwine or be, work together, but I'm sure they would find a way to do that because they are going to have the same set of goals. So, a few comments.
Thank you. David?
So, same thing, so I'll say flat out, I am in favor of it. What I'm wrestling with is what Roger just brought up, is should we be taking a position on this? The reason we're taking a position on it is for an endorsement. So we got the election coming up and they want to be able to say, these are all the town boards that are in favor, influencing the vote as best they can. I think our committee did take a position on this as far as back in May, and deciding to put
it on the ballot.
To put it on the ballot, and let the voters decide on it. So I could probably be swayed with another conversation the other way, but I just don't know if what we're being asked to do is something that we should be doing, and that is trying to influence the vote in November as a committee.
Frank?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David, you, I think, have hit on, I think, a key point for us as a committee. And we're not in the business of endorsements. We're in the business of managing budgets, giving guidance on how much to spend, when to spend it, primarily in the way of monies available from raise and appropriate or essentially accumulated funds in free cash for stabilization. So as much as I think this is a really good program for the town to adopt, and from the town meeting point of view, that's been discussed, and going on to the electorate, we'll find out what the taxpayers really feel about the cost of it, essentially. Some people question the merits of the need of it, but I think it's a little bit more driven by why do I want to encounter more taxes? And they need to decide that. I don't think ways and means, and Bill, I almost feel apologetic about this because I really think this is a great program, and I think there are ways to get around some of the concerns that I think John might have, and I know Doug has. He's articulated it again, and that's control over monies, sort of unilaterally, sort of better management of where the money should all go, because it's all in the end coming from an individual who lives in the town that pays their taxes, not an individual, but a resident, commercial or residential. That's why it goes to the ballot, and they're going to decide whether they want to encounter that additional tax and the way it's managed. One thing that I'm actually quite puzzled about, and this is to the chair and maybe to Bill, let's assume that the CPA is approved, the funds are open, and the committee's formed, and now recommendations come to town meeting. Are recommendations also supposed to come to Ways and Means for us to weigh in before going to town meeting? Do we weigh them at all? Is it really a pure town meeting decision to fund a given project? And I honestly don't know how that should go, and I don't know if we've got a clear policy saying how it should go. I tend to think that these projects should go straight before town meeting because they've got a recommendation through a process that funds it. And, who are we as the finance committee to say, no, you can't spend the CPA money on that project? So I would tend to think Ways and Means would be not especially a strong player in this group anyway. I'm curious about that. I don't know how it will get handled. I honestly feel like tonight we should not be doing an endorsement town meeting member would ask me, I would encourage them. But I don't think it's our role as Ways and Means, as the finance body, to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Comment, or
I think,
whoever's turn it is.
I think Ed
Sure.
had a comment.
Yes, I'll thank you for your comments so far, because I'll spare you a lot of my notes, because a lot of them are similar. But I want to point out that the purpose of, well, so first I'll compliment, John, your comment at May town meeting. You stated that that this CPA will distort our priorities relative to what has been manifested in previous budgets. That's true, and to Doug's point, that may hurt at times, because we're going to take cash away from other priorities, or just take cash away from the taxpayers. But I just want to point out that you also said that if you want to do that, then vote for the CPA, and I think that's where I come down. I think that the purpose of the CPA is to change those priorities, because structurally, the way we do budgeting, we are very concerned with year-to-year exigencies, and there are some things, and they fall into housing and open space and history, which are important to a community. They substantiate the character of a community, and they function on a scale of decades, if not centuries. And we would be making the choice to focus some of our resources on that, and that would change budgeting decisions overall, and that will cause some pain. And I think that it is responsible to prepare a budget that honors the values of the community. And so this vote is about what the community values, and I think we need to recognize that it's entirely possible that the values we manifest in our budgeting decisions as elected and appointed officials may be out of sync with the values of the residents, of the community in general. And this is a mechanism to address that. I think it's explicitly a mechanism to address that. And so I'd like to hear from the voters if they value this. And I don't particularly want to influence that decision with some concerns about the ways and the means, because I think we do have ways and means. It may mean some effort, and it may mean some pain, and I do see some inefficiencies, and I am ambivalent about certain aspects. There's some of these projects that need policy changes more than they need cash, but we do have plenty of projects that we could take on that I think would be very valuable to the community. So I think the worst possible situation is that it passes by 51%, and then we do a lot of arguing about what we actually value and what projects we want to do. But I hope that it goes overwhelmingly one way or the other, and I hope that we can inform the voters, this is going to take some work, but you should vote your values.
Did you have an additional comment?
I guess I wanted to comment a little bit on Frank's question about whether Ways and Means should weigh in on things that the CPA committee, when it's formed and everything, recommends. And I think our general charter is to make recommendations to town meeting about the financial condition and financial actions. And so I think generally, it is a CPA endorsed warrant article to spend CPA funds would fall into that category. I think we can provide some likely objective perspective on a particular thing. It is true that our only way really of expressing that is, well, with some commentary and then a vote. So it may look like up or down, but we do have context and we do have a perspective that can be valuable in advising town meeting about particular expenditures. I think it's also true that anything for any project to get to that point, it will have been through, the initial proposal and the CPA meetings, and and, you know, a number of reviews. So it, like many projects that come in through the town, other town standard mechanisms, will have had a lot of opportunity for discussion and review. And, you know, I wouldn't, for example, I would expect even the select board to have an opinion, maybe not vote about CPA proposed warrants. Again, from the context of the town as a whole. The town meeting is a representative of the community, but it's not a one-to-one, right? It's not a direct vote. So it's hard to know whether, you know, in almost every case, your representative does not actually represent every voter's opinion. It's sometimes not even proportional.
Thank you. Anyone else from the committee? Sonia?
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to go back, I think, to David's comment, because I am in favor of the CPA. I think that I hear you, Doug, on the budgetary stance, but I think Ways and Means it'll be incumbent on us now to maybe be saying certain projects that would normally be funded within an operating budget or as a capital budget. If it falls within the CPA, you know, it's going to be our job to say, take that to the CPA or apply through it through the CPA funding. The part I'd be interested in, which I know will be a discussion for another day, but, you know, will they marry with the budget time? In other words, you know, when budgets are coming before us and people want to do projects that could fall under CPA funding or regular operating funding or capital expenditures, you know, would those two budgets fall, or would those two approvals kind of be around the same time, so that Ways and Means as a financial body could make a recommendation that this would be a great funding mechanism for something that would fall within the CPA guideline, and therefore would alleviate some of the money that would normally be used within the through a capital expenditure. So that's just a question as an FY, you know, that I would love to find out, because I think it would help. And maybe that's not what the general public questions or asks, but maybe, you know, the people who look at budgets, it would be interesting to know, because if a playground comes before us, but we also know that it's viable to be applied for under the CPA, then, you know, maybe it's a good avenue for us to say, you know, take that to the CPA as a funding mechanism, so that we could save the funding mechanisms in the general capital expenditures for other things. So that's just a side note for me. But going back to Ways and Means taking a position, I struggle with that as a rule of thumb, only because you're opening Pandora's box. I mean, no disrespect to the CPA. You know, are we saying as a committee that we're going to start taking positions on things? Because if we take a position on something that goes to the ballot, then are we always going to be taking positions on things that don't directly affect us until the voters speak? And that is where I struggle with taking an endorsement on something. I would not, I'll defer to the chair on this, but I think if individual members of Ways and Means want to support the CPA and list their names as an endorsement and put that they are a Ways and Means member underneath it, I think that's a different thing. That's an individual, unless if the chair says differently, that's an individual who's saying, you know, past selectman, past Ways and Means member, current, whatever. You know, you can have your list of things. I know we've done that in campaigns in the past, but to say a board in its entity or a committee in its entity is taking a position, I do think you're opening Pandora's box of other votes coming to the Ways and Means and saying, when I'm talking about a ballot, I'm not necessarily talking about things going to town meeting. Town meeting looks to Ways and Means for a recommendation. But if you're taking something to a ballot, in my opinion, it's Pandora's box a little bit to ask Ways and Means to take a position on it as an entirety. That is just the way I feel about it. I don't know how the rest of the committee feels in general on it, but that's where the sticky part is for me. It's not this one particular thing as much as if we're going to do it for one, we should be prepared to always be willing to take a position on things that go to the ballot. So that's my feeling on that.
Thank you. Any other committee comments? Megan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question. So if we come, if something gets approved through CPA funds,
Are we able to use CPA funds to maintain that structure building, whatever it is?
It depends on the type of project that it is. We cannot, for example, have hire someone to do cleaning of a facility or, things like that to maintain a facility. No, that doesn't come under CPA funding. People have said that, we talked about a town swimming pool, well, who's gonna maintain it? But the recreation department pointed out that they'd probably be charging user fees for that, for membership fees and stuff like that to pay for it. So, that was just one example that came up where something is funded. Something like preserving the Francis Wyman House can be funded, but, hiring tour guides or, whatever cannot be funded. So there are limitations to what the CPA can fund.
Okay, and so if we build the swimming pool and then there's some sort of issue with it, there's a crack, how do we repair that? Where could we use CPA funds to repair?
Preserving recreational facilities that were funded with CPA is definitely allowed.
Is allowed?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mike?
Mr. Chairman, so how are we proceeding on this? Are you going to ask for a vote, or are we going to decide if we're voting? I'm confused.
So, I'll let you speak again, Bill. I know we put you off. Want to give everyone else a chance. I'll admit I was on the fence bringing this to the committee. It seemed like it was worth a discussion since it is clearly a financial matter, which Ways and Means is involved with all financial matters. It ultimately will affect the budget, which I think is within our purview. I think a lot of you brought up reasonable concerns that, if we do this, we might have to do other ballot issues. Certainly, I would limit it to financially related ballot issues at most. I would agree it's probably inappropriate for us to make a position on this one way or the other. That being said, if there is a motion and a second, we can decide to vote on that, and folks can all abstain if they feel uncomfortable making a position on it. My recommendation would be that we don't have a vote on it, though. I think you've all made some pretty good arguments that that's probably getting into territory we don't want to be getting into. It's very clear we make recommendations to town meeting. It's a little less clear that we make recommendations to the general voting population on something that's not very strictly a budget item. But I think that's a worthwhile discussion. Let me give Bill a chance. I know he's stockpiled a few comments here.
I ran out of paper. Thank you. Well, first of all, as far as voting as a board, the Ways and Means Committee, their role is to offer financial guidance to the community. I think that's, one of your main roles. And this definitely does affect the budget and the budget process and priorities and all those issues that have come up. So to me, you would have a role in stating whether you thought it was a good thing or not, in terms of how it might adversely affect your ability to run the budget or favorably. I did not like comments like, well, maybe we could not approve something because we can tell them to go apply for CPA money. I'm not sure that's the intent either, that people would apply for a CPA money because that's what they want to do, that's the avenue they're going for. But unless you were going to put in a proposal, you could apply for CPA funds as a board, anybody can. So, that would be the mechanism for that you would have to do that, I would think. I'm just going to take some of these questions, maybe not in a logical order, but as I wrote them down. The question was, will recommendations actually come before Ways and Means? And the answer is yes, in the usual way. All the proposals will be part of a warrant article. The warrant article will go through the normal process. You won't approve a project, but you will vote your endorsement on the warrant article, as you always have. And often warrant articles come before the town meeting and have a negative vote from a certain board or commission and get voted positive anyways, but that input is valuable to the town meeting, and you will have that input. And I would assume that if there's 6 projects on a warrant article, that they could be voted on individually. Some communities just vote on the slate of them and they say yes, and all 6 are approved immediately. Other communities take them one at a time. I like the one at a time method myself, and I'm sure you would too. There was a question about how the CPA can cooperate with a housing trust fund. Some communities take their 10% CPA for affordable housing and immediately put it into the housing trust fund. And that's their allocation from the CPA. And then the trust fund handles all the actual individual projects. So that is a mechanism that some communities have used. The comment that CPA will tend to distort the priorities of spending in the community, I think goes back to why the Community Preservation Act was formed, because certain program areas that enhance the character of a community were systematically underfunded throughout the state. That's what the state determined. That's why they set up the program, was to ensure a dependable source of fund for those types of programs. And I think that is a valuable thing. And the fact that that fund can accumulate over a period of time, you know, the 10% that goes into a certain minimum that goes into those 3 pockets doesn't have to be spent each year. It can be accumulated for perhaps for larger projects. They can be used to leverage grants from other institutions and federal grants and things of that nature as well. So, you know, the fact that only $10,000 a year historically has been spent on historical preservation, or $20,000, whatever it is, to me is an embarrassment. I mean, that's part of the reason that this was funded. Yes, sir.
By the way, that's on the commission. I have, for 15 years, I've said, tell us what you need.
Yeah, I understand.
And they're very tight with the dollar, and God bless them, they're very careful with their money, so it's not
Yeah,
on us.
I think they're apprehensive.
It's not on us.
They're apprehensive about asking for money or whatever. But anyways, that is one of that type of disparity is one of the reasons that this was, you know, approved and became a process that the state put forth. We heard something earlier from, you know, our economic development director and company about the vision for Burlington and how, you know, the whole mall area and things like that. CPA can fund something like that. We are increasing the amount of green space. So we could participate in a project like that. We could collaborate with other mechanisms that exist and other initiatives going on in order to improve the community. It's all about improving the community. One thing that the CPA committee is required to do, once it's formed, the local committee, is to do an annual needs assessment in the community. Each year you must do a needs assessment, go to the Conservation Commission, go to the Historical Commission and ask them, you know, what is it that you need? Try to get a flavor for putting the projects as they come in into some sort of priority order. Because that is one of the roles of this committee, the local committee, would be to put them in priority order and present that slate to town meeting in a priority order format. I think that's the comments that I have based on what I heard tonight. I mean, I certainly appreciate all the input, and there's a lot of, you know, what you're saying as a group is what we're hearing from voters as well, the yays and the nays and the pluses and the minuses. And I'm happy to hear that a number of you say you would individually vote for it. I don't see the problem in voting for it as a committee where you have a role in recommending financial actions to the community.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, first of all, I do think as a committee, I'll speak for myself, when there is something on a budget that could fall within the CPA, I will ask a department if they've applied for the CPA before I take it out of capital. So I understand that you don't like that, but that's what we do here. We move, we see funding mechanisms, and we say, where are you gonna fund it from? And if the CPA is an account that is gonna stay within the town, which it is, a funding mechanism, then we will I personally will be asking if it falls within a CPA, whether or not it's gone to the CPA's approval first.
And we've already done it.
Yes,
There's a
What?
historical shed.
yes.
Right.
It's on the
Well,
ballot, on the warrant.
Yeah, I mean, that's my feeling, right, is that you can either decide as a committee to fund from it, everything comes with a funding mechanism to Ways and Means. And sometimes that funding mechanism, if the voters vote favorably, will be CPA funding. So it will come to Ways and Means with a funding mechanism. And subcommittees will be talking to their departments about the same thing. Ways and Means is charged with recommending to town meeting. While we are a financial committee that looks at funding on behalf of the committee, we are charged with making recommendations to town meeting for ultimately a vote of town meeting. So while I answer philosophically to the community at large, we're really only recommending to town meeting, and the town meeting members are the ones who are actually making that recommendation. So I am in favor of the CPA. I am not in favor of endorsing it as a committee. I think that we are opening Pandora's box if we do that. I do not believe that any community member calls upon their Ways and Means members for a vote. They call upon their town meeting members for a vote. And while some of us are town meeting members in here, some of us are not. So it is a moment in time where a committee is recommending something to the body. Mr. Chairman, do you know, is town meeting taking a position on the CPA?
We voted to put it on the ballot.
It's not
Just to
on,
put it on the ballot, but are they taking a position?
it's not on the warrant, certainly.
There's no warrant to,
So that
no
is.
other, I mean, what is the other warrant that you could do besides put it on the ballot,
No, but we put things on a ballot all the time, whether people agree with them or not. It is the right of the community to vote on something. So town meeting voted to put it on the ballot.
Right.
Town meeting is not going to take a position on it. It's not in the warrant.
But with resolutions, someone could introduce a resolution on town meeting floor to do
100%.
such a thing.
100%.
It could be a resolution.
So a resolution is like an endorsement, so that would be something that would be asked of the time.
If I could just interject, that's actually not allowable because once, I'm trying to think of how it worded, well, maybe we could have done it this time, but once there is the way the actual act is written, once it passes town meeting, it must be on the next ballot.
Correct.
So there wouldn't be another town meeting in between for the
Well, they
even do an
voted.
endorsement, so.
Right.
But
So they voted for it to
in
go.
this case, they would be because there's another September meeting before the November ballot.
My only point, sir, is that I just don't think, if town meeting's not taking, all we would be doing is recommending to town meeting.
Okay.
We're not recommending to the
Understandable.
community. Our charge is to recommend financial things to town meeting to take a position on. If town meeting is not taking a position on it, then we have nothing to recommend. That's the way I see that.
As much as I would like a vote from the board,
I
I'd be
understand.
perfectly happy with individual votes saying yay or nay, and,
Yes.
that would be fine too.
Mike?
So, I mean, you're helping me to think about this. I was in a quandary too, and I think I decided if we do vote, I'm just gonna abstain because I don't know, feeling a little bit uncomfortable about it. And I also feel a little bad because Bill did a much longer presentation before, and it was much clearer to me at the time, all the benefits and all that. I feel like you did a very abbreviated one at the beginning of this meeting, so you haven't, I don't think, really made your full case for that.
I did not want to repeat what I did
I know,
before.
but-
I was going with the assumption people remembered the presentation.
Yeah, just saying, though, it was,
The case.
Yeah, the case has been made.
In detail, right.
I don't think it's a case factor as much as it's a policy factor. Is Ways and Means as a committee saying we're gonna start taking positions on things that town meeting is not gonna be voting on? I would argue that the answer to that should be no. We are an arm of town meeting. Our function is to tell town meeting what we believe is fiscally right or wrong. If they're not taking a position, Ways and Means as a body should not take a position. That's my opinion. So if the board is inclined or the committee is inclined to take a position, I'm going to abstain because I don't want to vote against the CPA, but I also don't think there's going to be, that we should not be taking a position. That's my opinion, Mr. Chair.
Is there anyone on the committee that feels that it's important that we take a position or desirable? Okay, so I'm going to take that as no one's going to put forward a motion. Oh, I'm sorry, Chris.
One point. I mean, you know, I think some great points have been made, and I think it's important to think of, you know, where the board has been before and how it does, but we also can't ignore that when Ways and Means does take a position, people do listen to that. And that's why we're all thinking this through and having a really good conversation about that. But we also know the moment that there's not a 14-0-0 vote on something, people question it and they put more interest in it, and they'll put more, you know, research and conversation if it's a 9-2-3, you know. So we can't ignore that this body does have an effect on town. And not taking a vote could have a sway the other way. I think the only thing I'm thinking of in the future is if this is how we're gonna be, is if we have to then go for a Proposition 2.5 override for schools, is that then gonna come before us as they're wanting an endorsement there? And is that would also be a financial potential ballot initiative? And would we then want to have a say on that? And yes, our recommendation is to town meeting, but it's a recommendation based off of the finances and how the finances affect this town.
So the answer is, if town meeting were to take a vote on something, then we would recommend to town meeting. If town meeting were gonna take a vote on 2.5, then Ways and Means would recommend to the body what we believed as the financial arm of town meeting. You know what I mean?
Oh, again.
I mean, that's, again, I'll defer to the committee if they wanna do it, but the charge is very clear for Ways and Means. It's, you are the financial arm of town meeting. So it's honestly, if the group wants to take a vote, that's absolutely up to the chair. You can call for the vote, but or up to the committee, but I think it's a slippery slope. I really do.
I think that's a good consistent position that we're making recommendations and town meeting will vote on. That's a very, very clear-cut way to define if it's something that we should be discussing in terms of taking a position.
I think we can let this opportunity pass.
Okay. So I'm hearing no motion. So,
Motion to adjourn?
no, can't do that.
Okay.
We do. So we're going to close this discussion and move on to our next item. We did have one more article.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I do want to thank Bill for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for the input. I mean, that's all input, and I hope that people at home, voters, are listening to hear the discussion as well, because, you know, that's our main role here, is to educate the public and make them make an intelligent decision on the matter. So, you know, this type of discussion, if people listen to it, is informative. And they hear support from individuals, which is important as well. So thank you for that.
Bill, thanks for coming. I
Okay.
appreciate it. We did have one more article, which will hopefully be less controversial. The Article 3, the Marshall Hyman's will. This is the second vote of the 2 votes required. Do our DPW subcommittee have?
Subcommittee did not meet, but this item has been on the budget for so many years, twice a year.
It's the second part of the first vote. We can't imagine you don't want the money.
You're feeling pretty comfortable about this?
Yes.
Now, we're accepting money, right?
This is a move to
accepting money.
accept money of $70,382.69, which this year will be, is part of the money funding the treehouse, which is currently being built up in Simons Park. Can I say move to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right. Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Tanya?
Yes.
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Doug?
Roger. Yes.
Yes. Yes. You gave a yes. Frank? Yes. And chair votes yes. Okay, that was smoother. We have the approval of minutes from July 13th. This will go quickly because they're not ready. So we're going to defer that.
Excellent.
Our new recording clerk will solve that problem shortly for us. Did we have any other topics for tonight?
Motion to
No,
adjourn?
I
Betty?
had an outstanding motion.
Yes.
Second.
Motion
Megan
to
just
approve.
seconded it.
Very good.
Oh, thank you, Megan.
All right. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Good. Adjourned.